Intel is back in the game. Intel's stock price has surged over 150% this year, and it's not because of their struggling 2nm process, but their new secret weapon, advanced packaging. Meanwhile, TSMC is also actively developing next-generation advanced packaging technology. What exactly is the difference between these two giants? Can Intel really score a win on this battlefield? For the past few decades, the rules of the semiconductor game were simple. Whoever has the leading process and can shrink transistors the most is the boss. In this regard, TSMC is currently the undisputed king, holding the most advanced 2nm process. But in the AI era, everything has changed. While chip computing power is important, what's even more critical is whether data transfer speeds can keep up. Simply put, in an AI server, the GPU is like a super brain that can process massive amounts of data, but its internal capacity is far from enough, so data must be stored in external memory. The problem is that these two chips are far apart, so no matter how fast your GPU runs, it just sits idle waiting for data to arrive slowly from the memory. To overcome this bottleneck, TSMC deployed another killer move: advanced packaging. The concept is actually simple. If the problem is that the data transmission path is too long, then just pack the GPU and memory into one single package to minimize the distance between them. However, it's easier said than done, because modern AI servers don't use traditional memory anymore. They use HBM memory with thousands of channels for massive data transfer. Even if you place the HBM right next to the GPU, the underlying substrate simply cannot support thousands of fine, dense lines to connect to the HBM, causing most of the data to get stuck. So how could transmission be fast? TSMC's approach is very clever. Instead of trying to upgrade the substrate, which has already reached its physical limit, they place the GPU and HBM on an interposer layer. It contains thousands of submicron lines that can perfectly connect the GPU and the HBM. This allows data to zip along ultra-short paths, naturally resulting in a massive boost in speed. Finally, engineers mount this whole assembly onto the substrate, which now only needs to handle power delivery and connection to the computer's motherboard. This is what we now know as CoWoS. Once this technology was revealed, all the AI giants went wild. From NVIDIA's H100 and B200 to Google's TPU, almost every AI chip developer insists on using TSMC's CoWoS, resulting in a massive bottleneck with everyone queuing for capacity. Even though TSMC has built several new advanced packaging plants, the time required for construction, equipment installation, and validation makes it unable to meet the urgent demand. Just as everyone was feeling as anxious as ants on a hot pan, Intel stepped in by introducing their own advanced packaging technology called EMIB. Intel's approach is pragmatic. They believe that using a full-sized silicon interposer is not only costly and hard to yield, but since it is manufactured on a wafer, its size is limited by the wafer diameter, restricting chip density. Consequently, Intel decided to insert just a tiny silicon bridge between the GPU and HBM to facilitate high-speed communication, using conventional substrates elsewhere to save costs and gain flexibility. However, accurately embedding such a small piece of silicon into a substrate poses a significant challenge to manufacturing precision. Intel devised a method where, during substrate manufacturing, they use lasers to cut precise grooves, insert the silicon bridge, and then stack other material layers to perfectly encapsulate it. Next, to allow the upper chips to communicate with the bridge, they use lasers to drill thousands of vertical micro-vias, precisely aligning them with the bridge's nodes, then fill them with copper to create conductive paths. The advantage of this design is a substantial reduction in cost and greatly increased flexibility, as the absence of a large silicon interposer means chips can be made in any size or configuration. Given these advantages of EMIB, does this mean that Intel, which has been trailing in advanced process nodes, finally has a chance to make a comeback through advanced packaging? Just as the outside world remained skeptical, news broke in April 2026 that Intel was in active negotiations with Google and Amazon to adopt their advanced packaging for custom AI chips. Even Intel's CFO confirmed that they have several advanced packaging deals close to being finalized, expected to generate billions of dollars in annual revenue. Intel has the confidence to make such claims because, as early as 2024, they leveraged CHIPS Act subsidies to completely transform their old New Mexico factory into the largest advanced packaging facility in the US, linking their wafer fabs in Arizona, Ohio, and Oregon into a complete domestic supply chain. After all, advanced packaging capacity is primarily concentrated at TSMC in Taiwan, which directly addresses clients' anxieties over geopolitical risks, essentially allowing them to stop putting all their eggs in one basket. While Intel's prospects look bright, there are still many variables involved in actually securing these orders. For instance, recent reports suggest that although the yield for the EMIB packaging samples Intel provided to Google has reached 90%, which doesn't sound bad, TSMC's CoWoS yield is a stable 98%, a figure that serves as the industry's benchmark threshold for mass production. Therefore, Intel still has a tough battle ahead to truly win mass production orders. And don't forget, TSMC isn't just going to sit idly by waiting to be caught. Aren't cost and size the advantages of EMIB? TSMC has long been positioning itself to address these 2 points, continuously evolving from the early CoWoS to CoWoS-L, and now to the next generation FOS-CoW, all to leave its competitors further behind. TSMC first introduced CoWoS-R, replacing the silicon interposer with cheaper organic materials to save costs. But the trade-off was that the circuitry wasn't fine enough for top-tier chips. So, the smarter CoWoS-L was launched, embedding fine bridges only at critical points on the cheap organic interposer for high-speed communication, thereby balancing cost and performance. But whether it's CoWoS-R or CoWoS-L, although their interposers have been switched to organic materials, they still require a wafer as a carrier during production, limiting area utilization to only about 65%. This is where the ultimate solution comes in: FOS-CoW. The keyword here is panel. Simply put, TSMC decided to move from round to square, replacing the circular wafer carrier under the interposer with an ultra-large rectangular glass panel, boosting area utilization from 65% to over 95% and lowering costs. Since the interposer size is now scaled to panel levels, much larger than a wafer, packing in 12 or even 16 HBMs is no problem for TSMC. Although mass production for FOS-CoW will still take 2 to 3 years, the production lines are already being prepared. Beyond pushing the boundaries of technology, TSMC also possesses the solid moat of its ecosystem. Tier 1 chip designers like NVIDIA and Broadcom have built mature designs around TSMC for years. Asking them to switch packaging technologies would require a vast amount of time just for revalidation. Furthermore, major memory players like Micron and SK Hynix have deeply aligned with TSMC. Micron's facility in Taichung, for example, is built right next to TSMC's advanced packaging plant, allowing their newly produced HBM to be delivered directly. For Intel to replicate such an interconnected ecosystem in a short period of time is an incredibly difficult task. It is clear that as Moore's law hits a ceiling, the semiconductor battlefield has shifted from front-end processes, who can make transistors smaller, to back-end packaging, focusing on who can stack chips higher. Intel has set its sights precisely on this opportunity, hoping to overtake its rivals on this new track and challenge TSMC's leadership position. So, do you think this shift in the battlefield from front-end to back-end will be an opportunity for a major industry reshuffle? Or will TSMC remain the ultimate king regardless of how the rules of the game change? Welcome to leave your comments.